Hi, my name is Margit Takacs, and I'm your host for our Change Matters virtual summit. I'm honored to have Rory van der Merwe with us today. Rory is a distinguished consulting psychologist who specializes in organizational development, project, and change management. And he has a mission to empower leaders and teams to navigate and adapt to changes effectively. Rory and I met over a year ago at a change management conference, and his message about the importance of adaptability captured my attention right away. I know that his insights will be valuable to the Change Maverick community out there, committed to taming the chaos of change at the workplace. A warm welcome to you, Rory.
Thank you very much, Margit.
A little bit of a time travel. A year ago, we met at that event, and you talked about something that's called adaptability quotient. I mean, we hear about intelligence quotient, emotional quotient, culture quotients, but adaptability quotient was a new expression. I admit I did not hear much about before. Would you mind telling us what it is and also how working on AQ, as you call it, can help an organization get better at change?
So I went into COVID literally a week before I was on a contract and the contract was terminated because everybody didn't know what we didn't know. So I went into COVID in that period of lockdown, and it was being called. In fact, there was an article written by World Economic Forum, published in April 2020, and it said, "The world's greatest psychological experiment, and we will pay the consequences and the price." And if you recall, they all talked around this tsunami of mental ill health. Now, we know that our relentless pace of change is just going faster. We know that there's more change activities happening in every business. We know that people are more fatigued. We know that the cost of living is good. There are too many factors that are outside of our control. And I looked at all of that was happening, and I was on a contract at a government agency. And the particular work that I was being contracted to do, I realized that my toolbox was no longer adequate. It was like I arrived there and there was this new wine with, the immense amount of work that was happening in our global economy, but specifically what was going on in South Africa with everything that was happening around lockdown. We had this Judicial Commission of Inquiry around state capture. It was organized corruption at grand scale, being conducted through a judicial process now in terms of an investigation. And one of the challenges that I had to do was I had to read all of those. So now I look at it and I summarize that and I say, this is an incredible change program done really, really well for all the wrong reasons. Because the leaders who sponsored it were profoundly influential and impactful. So the change in terms of, you need a good sponsor, you need to have that vision, they did that really well. But the consequence to 60 million people was catastrophic. So we need to be looking at change. And I looked at this and I had the analogy in my head of, we've got new wine. Why are we still using and showing up with the old wineskins? Why are we showing up with a focus group in an Excel spreadsheet? And that same person that sits in this focus group sits in the next focus group, sits in the next focus group. And why are we not using data-informed? Why are we not using analytics? Why are we not using the tool sets that the business world is using? And this is even in the early days of AI, if you think about it. Why are we not embracing and adapting to what can and should be? So Charles Darwin captured it really well. He said, it's not the fittest, the fastest, the strongest, or the most intelligent that survive and thrive in this crucible of complexity, chaos, and confusion. It's the most adaptable.
I think very, very well said. And adaptability, I guess I also felt, no, I'm quite adaptable. And when I did your quotient assessment, I had some eye-opening messages. Well, Margit, yes, you love change. You love the idea of high adaptability, but you have a way to improve that too. So would you tell us a little bit about how do you measure this sense of adaptability with the assessment you and your team are conducting?
So we have our change journey, and I love the old idea that we move from something, which is our current reality, and we move to this desired new end state. And then change is actually the messy middle. It's one thing to have the visionary, and it's one thing to have the person that's actually, this is the way we've always done things, and we're going to carry on doing it, and your change will never work. Those are the two extremes, but the most of us sit somewhere in that middle piece. And if we can get those people in that messy middle to anticipate and to expect better tomorrows. And that's the definition of hope. And what is in my control? And I looked for a tool set that looked for hope at a positive level. And I found this adaptability quotient. And it divides it into three broad areas. It talks to abilities. It's like our change muscles. It's things that we can improve, we can measure, we can teach, and we can improve those things. And those talk to things like grit and resilience. And let's face it, we're all gritty. Everybody shows up at work. You have to be gritty to get through today's lifestyle. But too much grit means that you actually change resistant, because I'm going to carry on doing what I've always done. But there's a cost and a consequence. That was that article that they wrote at the World Economic Forum. They said to us, this is the greatest psychological experiment, and we will pay the price. There is a consequence to grit. Now, grit is a good thing. But like any strength, too much of a good thing can become a flip side in terms of it's not always as good. So that's grit. Then you've got resilience. Resilience is that ability to bounce back. And that's where I came up with my concept of the wisdom of trauma, because I look at it, we are all traumatized. The issue is, how do we manage, navigate, and decide our attitude in that trauma? And that's what I think we underestimate. People, the majority of us, we all know, Margit, post-traumatic stress disorder. You know what that is. You've heard of that. That's the negative. What can go wrong? Have you heard of post-traumatic growth? What might go right? And there's scientifically, they're confirming that literally 4 times as many people in the same trauma environment will experience post-traumatic growth as opposed to those that end up being diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. So why do we focus all our energy on what can go wrong, when you've got 4 times as many people that are saying to us what might go right in that messy middle? And so for me, that was around, how do I change my thinking? That's mindset. How do I look at my mental flexibility? How do I start exploring? And what do I need to let go of? My unlearning. So there it is: grit, resilience, mindset, mental flexibility, and unlearning. That's that first piece. Those are the muscles that we can measure. We can train people to think and do and be different. And then you move across into the second piece is around character. And that's where the hope sits. It's how we think, our big picture thinking versus details. It's around how we show up in terms of making, are we responding in terms of emotional, you freak out? And we have a lot of those bosses. Or you have somebody who's more controlled and kind of says, actually, let's talk our way through this. Let's consider our options. And we all prefer to work for that kind of a, should we call it a more mature boss, who actually invites our contributions. So I'm going to jump ahead to the last group, is around environment, because my understanding, you and I, from a change point of view, we know change starts with me. So it's my emotional health. How am I sleeping? How am I showing up? How am I moving? How am I managing my relationships? It's my whole composite being, my head, my heart, and my hands. And then that manifests in terms of how much work stress. If I'm coping well with what I can control in me, nobody else can control that, only me. Then it shows up in my work stress. Now we all go and we run around and we say, let's reduce work stress. That's quite it's like grabbing mercury or holding water. It kind of slips through your fingers the harder you grab it. But if we actually spend more effort and attention in terms of what's in your control, what's in that circle of adaptability of me in my area of control, how's your sleeping, your eating, your movement, your relationships, your spirituality, how are you showing up? And as I say, I believe most people show up wanting to contribute. But our whole change methodology oftentimes starts off, oh, everybody's going to be lost. They're going to go into grief. They're going to go into the negative. They're going to go. Yes, it's true. I'm not saying we mustn't anticipate the negative and the what can go wrong, but I'm saying, why are we not asking more the question around what might go right?
You just shared with us something very interesting. It's all about the outlook. Resistance, that emotional dip or pit is natural. The question is, what is our mindset and how do we approach any changes? Either we are change leaders or practitioners. Thank you so much, Rory, for joining us and enriching your approach and understanding of the topic of change through your lenses.
Thanks, Margit. Appreciate the time.